one thing that people talk about is like on one side, we have surgical robotics, we have AI and everything, but medicine still functions through like fax machines and stuff. But then the other side is, and I think this is where I get excited about what Prenuvo is doing.
Prenuvo takes that to the next level. We don't replace the standard screenings. We don't replace having a primary care doc, but we supercharge good primary care and good screening by looking inside your body, by doing what we call a direct to specialist exam of the inside of your body. So Prenuvo is a drop in the bucket of body scanning, and we are not creating a body scanning society.
You mentioned you guys identify essentially as clinics. What kind of products do you guys actually use and what's proprietary to you?
Well, we're fully vertically integrated.
You can't replace part of the brain.
Like, you treat them the same.
Source of truth for the MedTech industry.
Coexists with the puppets.
Robot understands things automatically.
Number one show in the MedTech industry.
So Stryker got ahead of that and changed in the $90 billion company that held up high. A lot of things.
The state of MedTech
With your host, Omar Khateeb.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the show. We're covering a really great topic today, something that came on my radar, I think about a year or two ago, which I was personally very excited about. I think one of the problems that we have to do in not just healthcare, but in medtech is do a better job like marketing. And so I remember somebody sending me a message from Instagram saying like, hey, did you see this? And it was a Kim Kardashian post talking about MRIs. And I was just like, I don't know who this company is, but this is great. And so that company was Prenuvo. And they're really leading this category of how do we use imaging to be a lot more proactive in medicine, right? And I think that, as you know from the show, we're really big on any modality that really moves us into predictive health rather than reactive medicine where, you know, you start to feel something or, you know, you have some symptom and then lo and behold, you have some like disease that has like progressed way farther than it should have. How do we get to a point as a society that we're being a lot more proactive about this? And so thanks to the wonders of the internet and X, I got connected to Dr. Dan Durand, who's a CMO over at Prenuvo. So we're going to talk a lot more about the clinical side about it, like their mission. I'm really excited about that. And I don't want to forget, Prenuvo cares about you, the audience, as do I. So they actually created a wonderful discount for you guys. So you can go get a Prenuvo scan at any of their locations. And get $300 off. So if you just go to Prenuvo, that's spelled Prenuvo.com/state of MedTech, they did put a nice little landing page and everything. You can get that discount. And by the way, I'm not an affiliate at all, so I don't make any money on that, but that's just passed on to you, the audience. So Dr. Durand, it's great to finally have you on the show. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. It's great to be here, Omar. Thanks for having me.
Totally. Maybe before we talk about Prenuvo and everything, give us a little background on yourself. Like, how did you where'd you grow up? How'd you get into medicine? Where'd you do your training? You know, all the typical things that like physicians usually talk about when they meet each other.
Yeah. I grew up in Long Island, New York. Went to a public school called Shore-and-Wading River High School. It was big into certain sports, but very big into science. You know, I remember growing up and we didn't have a football team, but the equivalent of the quarterback on the football team was this kid, maybe 5 or 10 years younger than me, who won the Westinghouse science competition. And I just remember growing up with a lot of like-minded people. We had a national laboratory nearby, and during summers, instead of having a job, you know, at a restaurant or something, you could get an internship at Rethinking National Laboratory, which most probably haven't heard of, but it's the site of the first peacetime nuclear reactor. So for me, my mom was a biology teacher. My dad was a nuclear engineer, and it was kind of, I think, fortuitous. Like I would eventually be a radiologist. I just didn't know it yet. So I grew up doing science and sort of competing in science competitions. Wound up placing in the Westinghouse, but not winning it. But you know, and then sort of getting some great opportunities for college. Went down to Wake Forest University. Spent 4 years down there, majored in chemistry and learned a lot about other, you know, well-rounded liberal arts stuff. And then I headed up to Johns Hopkins for med school, and I'm still talking to you from Maryland. So I showed up here July 5th, 2001. And, you know, I've been a Marylander ever since. I went to med school at Hopkins, did the 5-year plan, did a little research to kind of figure out what I wanted to do. And in that research year, I was studying aging, which also kind of factors into what I do now. And I was specifically studying stem cells and trying to create models of older individuals, in this case rats, who have a heart attack and can they benefit from stem cells. And that that whole experience of what it meant to go from in vitro to in vivo, and the value of imaging and giving us endpoints to figure out what the current state of the organism is and whether you're helping it or hurting it with a therapy, or and even how aging is impacting it. That really took me from cardiology over to imaging. I decided rather than be a cardiologist, I wanted to be an imager, a full imager. And so I went and I did the regular kind of transitional year internship. Then I did 4 years radiology residency. And then I did a
This is all at
fellowship.
Hopkins still?
All at Hopkins. Yeah. I mean,
That's great. I mean, look, Hopkins is such a special and amazing place. I actually did research there for 2 summers. I was a Howard Hughes fellow, but like there's so much history
cool.
at Hopkins. Random factoid, by the way, do you know why they put glass like in the main hall, like where you see the like paintings of Blaylock and everything? Do you know why they put glass there? Like over the paintings?
I know.
All right. The reason why is because I think with Blaylock, one of the paintings, I'm pretty sure it's the Blaylock painting, a patient or somebody came with a pencil and like poked holes in the eyes. And that's why they put like glass there. But no, Hopkins is a special way. I want to go back real quick. I'm just curious. So my mother is actually a biologist growing up. At how old were you when you got your first microscope?
That is a great question. I don't think I had my own, but the real thing was I used to go into work with my mom when we didn't have a babysitter. And they had like a laboratory there, and the lady who runs it, I think is still alive, and my mom's still in contact with her. And her name was Mrs. Pizzonia, I think. Don't quote me on that. And she, they had all these animals, and it was a lab where they had animals. The students. So I remember petting a tarantula when I was 6 and kind of being fascinated with it. And I would sort of sit in and watch my mom do these labs with her students. Not all of whom were like super engaged. They were high school students. A lot of them I remember were like, they would like mess around with, they'd sort of be laughing at whatever I was doing because I was kind of a bit of a ham. I don't really feel like this would be normal today, but I used to be in there with the high school kids. And yeah, so I would see the microscopes. I understood like what an oil immersion lens was, that's like part of my childhood. And I remember she had this big model, a humanoid model that kind of looked like a torso. And it had all these organs in it, and you could take all the organs out and put them back in. You had to like figure out how they fit together. It was beautifully painted. This thing probably cost thousands of dollars. It was back when you had to make these things out of hand. And I remember every time I would go there, which would be several times a year, I would just sort of assemble this thing and disassemble it. And I was that's when I'm looking at a CT scan or MRI scan, like I see that. Like that's where I learned what all this feels like, even 20 years before I took anatomy at Hopkins.
That's awesome. I wonder so you essentially moved from cardiology and ended up going into radiology then.
Yes. Yeah.
I
wasn't formally enrolled in a cardiology training program, but in my mind took a whole year just to do research to tee myself up for a really good residency match and then a fellowship match, which is what doctors do to get into a top-notch cardiology program. And I just decided I really was more in love with the imaging and wanted to just go deeper on that.
I wonder if you agree with it. There's this meme on that goes around on X about radiologists where it shows like, I think like Elon Musk and then Jeffrey Hinton. I think it's Jeffrey Hinton, the AI guy, where it's like AI is going to replace like all radiologists and all imaging, and then it shows like an image that shows like a highway and says radiologists in their cars in traffic on their way to their job.
Yeah, I've seen it. Yeah. I mean, yes, like radiology, because it's analytical, was one of the first specialties as machine, like way before there were LLMs and people were even seriously entertaining the idea of general AI, which I think many are now. Like the singularity seems like some people are saying it's occurred in some subsets of AI already, right?
I mean, look, we're technically, we're walking cyborgs, right? We both have a smartphone. We have access to ChatGPT and all these things. This is like, in a way, like, Kurzweil, when he talked about it, like the singularity, I think a lot of people think of it as an event, and it's really like this like transition that just starts happening, right? I think it's a really great time also to be in healthcare medicine, and this is probably a good like segue into Prenuvo is, what I think is exciting is that when you come up with all these new breakthroughs in technology, and so like the innovation becomes like recursive in the sense that like the innovation starts arriving sooner and sooner and sooner, like and the cycles get faster and faster. I think like healthcare and medicine is probably the best application for that because first of all, like it's such an outdated industry. There's, I mean, one thing that people talk about is like on one side we're we have surgical robotics, we have AI and everything, but like medicine still functions through like fax machines and stuff, right? Like it's so you have this duality. But then the other side is, and I think this is where I get excited about what Prenuvo is doing. All of medicine, like when you went through training, I was in medical school. I actually dropped out halfway through. But when all of medicine up to this point, when you look at like Robbins pathology and Harrison's and all these texts, were based on data that you got sparsely. And so what ends up happening to the standard of care, like when you automate a lot of the data capture, you get it earlier, right? And sort of exposes new standards, right?
Well, and sort of like the idea of multi-omics, right? So to go back to Osler, like I think I gave a talk a couple months ago.
I know you're a Hopkins guy if you mentioned Osler.
Yeah, well, I mean, technically, Osler was a Hopkins guy, but he started at McGill, he was at UPenn, he was at Hopkins, and he wound up with this chair at Cambridge at the end. So he did all the major places of his day, and he's thought of as the greatest internist, right? He's sort of like the Dr. House of history in a way. And if you listen to his writings, the reason he liked the physical exam was he could take in a ton of data. He didn't have to act on all of it, and some of the data could fake him out, but he would smell things, taste them, look at them, feel them, right? Like everything that was available to him, he would sort of let that inform his picture of the patient, and so he didn't rush himself. So I think that mentality, right? He's a guy that would want to know somebody's radiome, right? Their whole body radiome, that with the data we collect. He would want to know their genome. He might want to know their metabolome or their proteome or their exposome, right? And what would really limit him, which limits all humans, is how do you, in a 20 or 30-minute appointment, or even in like 20 years, how do you go through all that data? Because I just described like a petaflop or something of data, and that's where AI comes in, right? I mean, to be able to gather data broadly, to be able to filter it and surface the most relevant parts through statistically meaningful risk stratification or finding specific things that actually are diagnostic on occasion, as we do. And then to be able to say, okay, we took all your data, we took your preferences, and here's the things you should focus on the next year or next month or whatever in your health before you go and retake the data. I think, we all believe at Prenuvo, in one way or the other, that's the future of healthcare, which is why we're at Prenuvo. And a whole body MRI is one type of data. Now we're also grabbing labs, but we're going to be getting into, over time, many different types of data because we believe in that sort of multi-omic hypothesis.
If you're a CEO of a MedTech company and you just got ghosted by another investor this week, or maybe a strategic that you're trying to have a meeting with just kind of brushed you off at a conference, and you're just sick and tired of all this, you want to make these people pretty much eat their words, right? I think I have something for you. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Most MedTech startups don't fail because of product. And trust me, I can confidently say this after interviewing so many different startups on the show, investors, strategics. A lot of them fail because the market never really formed around them. My obsession with technology adoption and, more importantly, market engineering has sort of taken shape over the years into my business called MarketCraft and recruiting a top tier team around me for that. And MarketCraft, we're not just about digital marketing and campaigns and everything. We focus on engineering markets. We use AI-trained models, psychology, persuasion, and strategic storytelling to manufacture something that every single CEO needs, and that's leverage. We want to give you leverage with the market, so by creating magnetic messaging and attention, we can shape a belief system that is going to attract and magnetize those early clinical adopters to you. We want to give you leverage with investors because when your category narrative is very clear and your demand signals are loud and you can show this early clinical pipeline, and then at that point, capital start to chase you instead of the other way around. Now you have options. And then leverage with strategics. Because look, when you show a strategic, and trust me, I've had many conversations with them on this podcast and offline. When you show them that you're starting to own momentum in a space that they care about, you don't just look like a startup to them anymore. Now you look more like a partner. And if you do it really well, potentially competition they need to take out, right? So if you're an early stage MedTech CEO and this all resonated with you, I want you to stop what you're doing, put pause on this podcast, go to growmymedtech.com. That's GROW, growmymedtech.com. I want you to book time with me. Okay, we're going to do a little bit of a market analysis for you. I'm going to come to the table with 2 to 3 really good ideas. There's not a guarantee that you guys might be a fit for us. It could be the wrong time, a lot of things like that. We turn away more companies than we take on, but I can guarantee you that you're going to walk away with 2 or 3 really good ideas for free, and it's going to be a good conversation. So go to growmymedtech.com. I'm really looking forward to talking with you, and more importantly, you can feel free to vent to me about all the problems that you're having, because at MarketCraft, we want to come and solve those for you immediately. Now, let's get back to the episode.
So, and this is probably a good segue. So, like, what exactly is Prenuvo? What does the name Prenuvo mean? And what is Prenuvo essentially?
Prenuvo is the world's largest and in some sense first set of clinics dedicated specifically to proactive, what we call preventative MRI imaging. And we also blend that with a service where we get labs which aren't drawn on site yet, but one day maybe. Prenuvo, the name, it predates my tenure at the company, but there was a person named Renu who was diagnosed late stage with, I believe, colon cancer, a young woman who the founder of Prenuvo knew. And so Prenuvo was sort of a way to memorialize her experience and to think about how to maybe prevent the next one from happening or the next several from happening. Because there are many, many people who die of cancer. We all know that, right? You can read the statistics, but everybody has this in their life. And if you reflect on it, sometimes it's someone who didn't get the screening that might have been recommended. But more often than not, at least in my life, it's someone for whom there wasn't screening. We only detect in this great country with a century after the human, well, not a century, but a generation after the Human Genome Project, which was wrapping up at the turn of the century. So we're at 2026, and only 14% of cancer, right, is detected through screening exams. And so there's a lot of people getting diagnosed late.
Yeah, and look, like, I mean, he was a friend and mentor from afar and beloved, but like we just lost somebody as a result of that, which was, Scott Adams passed away just a week ago, due to prostate cancer of all things. Really, really, really sad. And so I want to get to a point where, it's kind of like, I hope that we can get to a point where we look at cancer maybe as benign and not benign, but like as we do with like something like high cholesterol, right? Or anything else. It's like, oh, you have high cholesterol. It's like, well, you know what? We can go the route of taking some statins. We can do this. We can do some dietary changes. But like, it's kind of like, not a big deal.
Like a manageable chronic disease, right?
Yeah.
And there are some forms of cancer.
Not a death sentence.
Yeah, not a death sentence. There are some forms of cancer today that people manage conservatively, right?
I think a great example of this is that, like, I feel like the best use case for Prenuvo on the scans is like pancreatic cancer, because by the time, so just so people understand, the pancreas where it sits is so deep in the body that, like, if you end up with a tumor there and it grows, you're not going to feel anything. And by the time you do, the cancer is already metastasized, which is why it's such an aggressive cancer. And like, you die within like a few months sometimes. Like that should just not be happening. Like, we shouldn't have to be waiting for something like that happening. That was the cancer that killed Steve Jobs.
Yeah. He had a form of pancreatic cancer, and we find a fair amount of pancreatic lesions. Most of them precancerous, sometimes cancers, and cancers of different types, including the type that I believe he died from. I didn't know it directly. I just read whatever books you would have read about it. Pancreatic cancer absolutely is. There isn't a trial showing that early detection, saves life, but that late detection results in a very quick death. And like most forms of cancer, the earlier you get, the better chance you're going to have. That is until we have large scale trials to prove this stuff out. That's what we tell people. That's what we believe. That's why I get scanned. I have a moderately increased cancer risk, I'm told. I'm like many people of my ancestry, I'm a half carrier of the cystic fibrosis gene. So I have a tendency towards, if I were to smoke or get a lot of infections, I could get bronchiectasis and maybe develop lung cancer. And also I have a higher risk than the average person. I don't know how.
So how did you find out that you were a carrier? Was this something through Prenuvo or through another test that you did?
Yeah, that was through a test I did, for personal medical issue. I mean, essentially when we're doing family planning and we did, my wife and I got screened, and that was what came up for me was, they screen you for recessive genes to sort of see if there's anything to worry about when you have children. If you do the service, it's not uncommon, but it's usually like Prenuvo, I believe it's out of pocket. I think I paid out of pocket for it. And the only thing that came up was I was a CFTR carrier, so the cystic fibrosis transporter. I have one good one that serves me well since I don't have, that's the reason I don't have cystic fibrosis. But if I were to have, if my spouse were to have the same one, then we'd have a 25% chance of having a child with cystic fibrosis. So, but even if you're a half carrier, you don't have something quite as, problematic as cystic fibrosis, but you do have statistically an increased risk of cancer. And again, I don't know the exact amount, but I was told this on the Florida recent conference, and it kind of goes to, you could be in the industry, you can go to school like I did until you're 32 at a great place. You can know all these things, you can get all the healthcare you prescribe. I still don't even know, even though I've paid out of pocket, I don't even know my exact risk of pancreatic cancer. Like, I think with all the computing we have, and I'm hopeful in a few years that I'll be able to get what's called a polygenic risk score, and I'll know exactly what my chances of different things are, whether it's cancer or health disease or heart disease or, I don't know, dementia. And I'll be able to kind of live my life and make my choices in a way that games those percentages, right? Like that like maybe I really want to eat meat, but if I have a super high risk of dementia, I mean, maybe it would be worth going plant-based, I mean, so there's just decisions. People always say, oh, people should just like never drink, never smoke, get lots of sleep. What's the problem? Do all these things. And in real life, you got to make decisions. Everything's a trade-off, right?
And everybody's different too. Like on the smoking side, so like I don't smoke cigarettes, but like I do partake in a cigar, right? I'm part of a club, and so maybe on a monthly basis. But like there's even a study that shows that like they actually followed men who smoked anywhere from like 2 to 3 cigars a day, and there was like no meaningful difference in terms of their like longevity and life expectancy. And if anything, smoking cigars actually increases testosterone, right? So like there's that. But I think you're absolutely right, which is like it's not a one size fits all. I think it's a lot based on genetics and everything. So on that note, so like a patient decides to go and enter like a Prenuvo clinic, like what does the cost look like, and like what exactly are they getting, and what's the justification? I think the most important thing for that.
Yeah, the justification is that we all have this notion of going to the doctor for an annual physical, and Prenuvo takes that to the next level. We don't replace the standard screenings. We don't replace having a primary care doctor, but we supercharge good primary care and good screening by looking inside of your body, by doing what we call a direct to specialist exam of the inside of your body. We use MRI because there's no radiation involved, and it is the best modality for visualizing the soft tissues. And the soft tissues are like the majority of your body. Even your bones have a significant soft tissue component to them. So we look throughout the entire body. We see some areas better than others. The areas we see the best are probably like the brain, prostate, liver, pancreas we see quite well. Areas we don't see quite as well would be lungs or colon, although we do still find things there, on occasion. So there is still value to it. And you're getting this sort of exam from a radiologist that you won't meet in person. But once the report comes back, you'll have the opportunity to go over it with a licensed practitioner. So either a preventive medicine nurse practitioner or a preventive medicine physician. We have both on staff. And they will make sure that you understand the information. The data comes through to an app, so you see your images as soon as the report's released. You get instant access to your images, which throughout most of healthcare, it's getting there, but it's a little hitchy and hard to see your images. And we include key images of what we find. And we're always going to find something, because you have so many different parts of your body that not all of them are going to be like the factory normal we all think of, right? Just like very few people have the temperature of 98.6 degrees that we all learn in med school. It's actually a big bell curve. And, very few people walk around with that exact temperature. Same thing with your vascular anatomy. So I have, an unusual vascular variant in the way that my brain is wired. That's about, I think, maybe 2% of people have. So you learn these different things about yourself, some of which are informational, some of which could predispose. So you might learn like that you have what we call a Paris defect in your spine. And, that's either a normal variant or from a prior injury when you were younger. There's like active debate. No one really knows. But it does, it is something where if you had pain down there and you have this, that your chance of having some sort of complication from that would be higher than the average person. So some of these things can predispose towards injuries or sources of pain, so they're good to know about. Many of the things we find are showing aging and wear and tear, which also we feel there's value to, because longitudinally over time, you can see if the decisions you're making are helping stabilize these things, or if they're continuing to worsen, or maybe some behaviors are accelerating it. So I'll say that I have a few discs that are, showing some wear and tear in my lumbar spine. I did combat sports as a kid, did karate and wrestling, and I even coached a little bit of youth wrestling, and I do a fair amount of weightlifting. And I'm at my age, I'm sort of reading Peter Attia's stuff. And my question is like, do I continue to do deadlifts, right? And part of that is like, I'm looking at my discs every year. Yeah.
I'll tell you, like, deadlifts, it's just the highest like risk to reward ratio is just like, it's just not worth it. So I actually got what was it? Rep Fitness actually has a great trap bar, so that way you can do some deadlifts and not get hurt. And it's like $250. I was like shocked how cheap
I only
they
do
were.
trap deadlifts, but I'm thinking about even maybe getting away from that. I don't, but anyway,
at the end of the day,
the point is,
we're like, again, the whole idea is like longevity. And so like, even me, I've adjusted how I work out, because like, sure, I want to be like in good shape and everything, but I want it to last, right? Like, I have young kids. And so like, just squatting 500 pounds right now makes sense for me. Like, no.
Yeah. I mean, it's all about functionality, but then we're also learning. It's interesting. I never thought of it this way, but people think of like having muscles being functional. Like, you could be a high performance athlete. Most people aren't, like you mentioned, so you don't need to be that strong, but you want to be strong enough so that you can do the things you want to do when you're 70, 80, 90 years old, because it's hard to get muscle back. But there's also another role that muscle seems to play, and some of our research is supportive of this. We're not the only ones generating the idea, but just the amount of muscle that you have, it's like a metabolic reservoir to suck up the blood sugar, right? So that it doesn't go to raising your A1C, doesn't go to build insulin resistance, for example. So the muscle is kind of like a metabolic organ, many feel. And we've, our research kind of bears that out. We see people with more visceral fat having higher rates of loss of brain volume, people with more muscle having better rates of brain volume preservation. And it's funny because, back in the day, people would have said, oh, these muscle bound guys, like, they're not so, there was like the big muscles, not so smart kind of stereotype, but not really, not as an independent risk factor at all. That doesn't seem to be true. When we look at the data, it seems like people with good muscle mass are more likely to be able to keep their cognition, keep their brain matter.
Yeah. And it's interesting you say, like, again, as we get access to more data. So like, our, I guess, soon to be mutual friend, Dr. Sean O'Mara, who was on the show, and we're going to, all three of us, get on another episode to talk about it. But like, the visceral fat thing is fascinating, because like, so as an example for me, for improving my HRV and everything, I was thinking like, okay, maybe I need to do more long distance running. And then Dr. O'Mara was like, no, actually, that's not a good idea. And at least from his research and also some studies that published, it showed that like, if you're doing like long distance running, like, 10, 15 miles, like something crazy, you're spiking your cortisol and keeping it at a high level. And so you might look really good, but your visceral fat is actually much higher as a result of that. So like, I think, again, as we're applying like these different modalities in medicine, we're getting access to new data and getting a better understanding of like what longevity kind of looks like.
100%. I mean, and the data, you got a guy like Brian Johnson who's collecting a massive amount of data on himself. And I people have all sorts of opinions about Brian. I'm like generally a fan of someone who puts himself out there like that. I think it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard to figure out like what intervention did what, because he's doing a lot of them. But we're going to have so much data on so many different people, and I'll be one of them. Like, I believe in this citizen science thing. We're going to know so much with the real world evidence, so much more in 5 years and 3 years. I don't subscribe to this idea of longevity escape velocity, where we're all going to like get to the point where we can add to our longevity more than a year each year, and thus like outrun death forever. I don't believe that's going to happen. Right? But there are people out there that are hopeful about all this stuff, and you supercharge it with AI, right? And you get a lot of interesting speculation. So it's exciting.
Well, like, speaking about the AI layer, like, you've tweeted about this, about AI essentially being a great augmentation for a radiologist. How is AI specifically helping like the team over at Prenuvo when it comes to interpreting these scans and making sense of them? Because I think the biggest thing, I have a Whoop, so part of it is like getting access to the data, and a lot of it's new data, and like what do you do with it, and how does it change your behavior?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I was saying before, everyone predicted that radiologists would be one of the first specialties that would be adversely impacted by AI, and it's really couldn't be farther from the truth. And I'm not saying there's no radiologist out there that doesn't like AI. There could be. But since AI came out and started impacting our field, number one, 80% of the FDA approved products for AI are in radiology. I mean, like 80 and 20 are in all the other specialties. Like it's an incredible 80-20. And that is because some of the first really good algorithms weren't LLMs. They were more like with AI, ML, machine learning algorithms for image recognition. The second thing is that demand has never been higher for radiologists. And it's also true that many radiologists feel like they have to work super fast and there's some burnout in radiology. I don't want to trivialize any of that. But I think overall, radiology has really held its own and probably done better than most specialties in terms of the demand for people and sort of the types of working arrangements they can get for themselves. And so it's the opposite of what people think is going on out there. And is it happening because AI is massively improving productivity today? I would say yes and no. So yes, it's improving imaging productivity. The way that we do our scan at Prenuvo, we're able to do the same scan today, more or less, that we would have done, let's say 3 or 4 years ago. We can do it in about a third less time because the device manufacturers are using AI to get the signal out of the noise more efficiently. You can think of it that way. And I think everybody's very hopeful that this could lead to massive breakthroughs over time as AI really scales, that you could maybe do one of these scans in like 10 minutes. Who knows? That would be amazing. It would also help broaden access and reduce costs.
How long does a scan usually take?
Scan depends on the scan you get. We have a torso scan that is our entry point price scan. That's $999. That takes like around 35 minutes. And then our enhanced scan takes about an hour and 10 minutes. That's the one with all the bells and whistles, and along with some AI post-processing. That one costs closer to $4,000. So it's around $1,000 to $4,000. In between, there's a classic whole body scan, which is $2,500. And we're going to be, continuing to innovate and hopefully coming out with additional options for folks over time.
Got it. What's like the biggest, for the audience that's listening, like what's the biggest difference essentially between that like super premium one and like, let's say the whole body?
Yes, it's mainly the amount of data, the amount of insights. So the one with all the bells and whistles, the enhanced. First of all, today it comes with labs. So there'll also be a panel of labs that goes along with it, which can often be more than additive in terms of the value of the imaging plus the labs and the insights that are generated. And we also measure using FDA cleared products the volumes of all the different parts of the brain. So it's a brain health scan. It can pick up things like gradual shrinkage of your brain. It can pick up if one part of your brain is disproportionately small relative to other parts, and also if you get more than one scan, you can see if it's getting smaller. And this is relevant with if it's the hippocampus, for example. That's the classic one that you see to shrink in very early Alzheimer's. So that would prompt a deeper. It's not diagnostic of, but it is a risk stratification tool that can be used to figure out if you need to go deeper and see a neurocognitive specialist. We also have a body composition product that is FDA cleared and was developed by us, where we're able to quantify visceral fat, muscle, and let people know where they lie relative to age and sex adjusted peers. So I can get a scan and it can sort of say, here's how much visceral fat you are, and here's how you compare to other men in your age group. And this is important because we believe the best way to measure visceral fat. You can measure it indirectly through impedance. You can measure it through a DEXA, but doing true cross-sectional imaging with AI that actually goes in there as if it's, a PhD student or something, tracing out every single voxel of fat, right? AI can do this. And then it returns a value that, it would have taken hours for a physician to get before. So no one really had these values before.
Yeah. So that leads me to another topic. So like one of the reasons like why we got connected and everything is that like on X, X has a great like medical community, but there's always like two sides to this argument that are debating. And one of the debates is this sort of incidentaloma debate, which essentially is like, okay, you get a scan And some of the times these scans will lead to unnecessary like biopsies and benign findings. So like for me, I'm very pro scans and everything. I'm probably gonna be doing a Prenuvo. I think maybe in the next like week or two, I need to schedule it because I'll be up in the LA area at Cedars. But there's a part of me where I worry and I'm like, okay, is it worth knowing this early? Because everybody usually dies. Let's say you die of a heart attack or anything else. A lot of people die with some form of benign cancer, right? And so there's this like happy medium of like, or this essentially this debate is like, okay, is it necessary to find that out? And to your average patient, is it going to cause them to freak out and go down this rabbit hole of like getting a biopsy, all these things? So like, what's like, how do you guys think about that?
Well, there's a lot in that question. So I'll start out by
a lot.
saying,
Yeah, I threw the kitchen sink at it essentially. So I'll let you pick it apart.
We didn't talk about my background other than med school, but like for around 8 or 9 years prior to this, I was running population health and at a health system, and so I'm pretty familiar with screening in general. And while there's deeper evidence and the recommended screenings, I'm not detracting from that, but they could the same criticisms like could be said of the stuff that is much less controversial and much that everybody tends to recommend. So the criticisms themselves, aren't don't disprove the value. And I would say also like those other things, like no one's forced to get a mammogram or lung cancer screening or any of those things. This is a personal decision. We, I think, have a deeper level of informed consent than most for those other procedures. I mean, because we let people know what the limitations and which include some of the things you referenced. However, let's talk about the term incidentaloma for a second, because it's actually a term that I say is like banned in whole body elective imaging. The reason I say that is incidentaloma is the word is incidental, right? It's something you incidentally find, like you incidentally ran into your grandma on the way to the grocery store, right? Like you weren't planning on it, and it happened to you. There's nothing incidental. This is a direct search for your grandma, right? This is a direct search for anything in your body that's abnormal. So it isn't an incidental. We just have findings, and then they're classified by how worrisome they are. And we have two separate ways of classifying findings. One is a bit more of a consensus method that's specific for cancer, and we call the OncoRADS system. And if something essentially is 0, if there's no finding, it's 1 if there's no finding, there's 2 if the finding is like definitively benign, 3 if it's indeterminate, 4 if it's suspicious, 5 if it's highly suspicious. It's similar to the BI-RADS scale if you've ever seen how people read mammograms. And it's not backed by major societies, but it is within the field of whole body imaging. Numerous people use it. And then we developed something called clinically significant disease to capture all the other things on a 5-point scale. So if we see someone, they come in, they happen to have bleeding into their brain, and occasionally you do see this if you image enough people, like that's a 5. That's like, you need to go get this checked out if it's acute blood, right? But if you see something and it's like, maybe there's some diverticulitis, that depending on how bad it is, it's probably a 4. Like it's probably something you do need to do urgently, but you could call your internist, potentially depending on other symptoms. And then there's stuff that's just like a 3 or a 2, things that just 3 is like follow up on an as needed basis, more in the days to weeks, and 2 is just informational. Unless you develop symptoms, you wouldn't necessarily follow it up. So we have this clinically significant disease spectrum. And nothing's incidental to us. We're trying to find stuff that's abnormal, explain what it is to the patient, and then give them a framework and a recommended pathway for what they do with that information. But let's think about where incidental comes from, because I agree that there is an incidentaloma crisis in the country and throughout Western medicine. And there are like 4 times as many of these incidentaloma things as there were 10 years ago. And the reason is that we are already a body scanning society. So Prenuvo is a drop in the bucket of body scanning, and we are not creating a body scanning society. We're creating a proactive health society. We talked about that, but the body scanning society is that when you go to the ER in the West, you there's a very low threshold to scan you. And the more that we use physician extenders and the more that we make hospitals throughput-oriented businesses, right, which is how they often behave, the more you're likely to get scanned with radiation at a time when you're confused, when it's late, and there's lots of symptoms going on. And when they find something that's an incidentaloma at that point, it really is like, look, we were looking for an appendicitis, and your appendix is fine, but now we've got a spiculated nodule in your lung. And it's kind of annoying to everybody because that wasn't like, they didn't they almost never consent the patient, like, hey, you're going to get this appendicitis thing, and it could find this other thing, right? So it's sort of like new information, and it's not usually covered in that CPT. So the health system's like all about like, how do we treat this appendicitis? Now we have to figure out how to also counsel a patient, make sure they get follow-up. And a lot of it doesn't happen. A massive amount of this doesn't happen. And a lot of the times, if you talk to somebody, they don't necessarily remember anyone talking to them about it. It's just like in their report that they have to go do this. That doesn't happen with us. If they decide to get their consultation, it gets explained to them. Like, it's all contained within our model, and none of it's
that's part of your consent, essentially, right? Because it's an agreed upon consent, and there's like a protocol for this. Versus, again, like, yeah, I agree with you that a lot of times, like, a patient will go to the hospital for like a checkup, or they go to the ER or something gets found out, and like nothing happens, and then the patient goes and he gets worse, and they're back.
Yeah, I mean, it's always the patient is often like, especially in a direct-to-consumer model, like when they have the football, they have the football. You have to, you give them the information, but the point being, like, they're much more likely to understand what to do with it if they came for that type of information, and it's explained to them. It's not like a footnote and as part of an encounter that was mostly about appendicitis or something that was life-threatening that night. And just statistically speaking, that's where, we'll take the thyroid for a second, because people talk about, hey, some people think you don't want to know if there's stuff in your thyroid, and some people think you do. And I'll just say, it's interesting when people make a big point about the thyroid, because there are like 20 million chest CTs done annually in this country. And almost all of those visualize part or all of the thyroid. So we're basically screening 20 million thyroids with radiation, but it's a random lottery. It's not about like who wants to get screened, right? Or who should get screened or anything like that. It's like whoever happens to have chest pain also gets a thyroid screen in the way we kind of run medicine. And this is in the rest of the health system. And, Prenuvo, we're doing it without radiation. We're doing it for people that proactively want to look inside their entire body, which includes their thyroid. We have a very specific way that we read these and recommendations we make. And again, like, if you want to talk about thyroid screening, we've screened about between 150,000 and 200,000 patients ever. And I just told you annually that the ER screens something like 20 million thyroids in this country. So if these things are really big issues, and I actually don't think that's a big issue. I personally think that that's an ancillary benefit of getting a chest CT, because you don't have to react and do foolish things with information you get, which is a separate thing we could talk about. But the bottom line is, like, if you're against body scanning and you're against incidentalomas and things like that, Prenuvo is not your problem. Go think about ER imaging utilization, right? Prenuvo is the only way out of that, I would say. It's the only way we're going to have multiple endpoints of people in a state of health that we're actually going to learn, right, how to manage these things conservatively and not stress out about them.
No, I like that, and I completely agree. And again, I think what I like about the model, not just Prenuvo, but a lot of companies like this, is that moving into a more proactive approach to healthcare. I think it started to happen a lot with the wearables, because people started getting access to different, measurements, and then getting more interested in their health. I think a lot has happened. It was trending, but COVID really accelerated it. But I think this is the way we get out and really get better about our healthcare. Again, like, some people might argue that, like, oh, it's $2,000-$3,000 is really expensive. There's a lot of people who are lower to middle class on the economic spectrum, and they're spending their money on all kinds of things that, are not, and I think that, like, getting to a point where people are, you can have health insurance, but then you say, hey, every year I'm going to carve out a little bit of money to do some proactive measurements on my own to improve my health, and not just say, hey, I'm just going to wait till I end up in the doctor's office. Because even the doctor, like, look, I work in this industry. And for me, like, there were some things that came out, a little high on my blood work, and I'm having to think, like, okay, the supplement I'm going to be taking, or this thing, there's actually an absorption time. Like, when's the best time to do it? Like, I had to go figure that out. My doctor wasn't prepared to have that conversation with me.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of, again, in speaking as a patient, because we're all kind of patients of preventative proactive health if we choose to be. You learn a lot when you gather a lot of data and then regather it. You can, if you're focused and disciplined, you can sort of see what the impact of things are for you personally. And they aren't always what the impact is in the textbook. I mean, that's an important thing to realize, is that we have this notion of medicine and what's covered by insurance, and the way we've done medicine, I would say most of the last 50 years, is this idea of it's better than what came beforehand. It's broad evidence gathering, but it's not really very precise. We've been about a generation after the human genome, and we're still not really using information that tells patients what's good for them specifically always. And it's why when you try a drug, sometimes it's like, well, we're going to try this drug, and we're going to see how it behaves in you. And there are potentially more elegant ways to do this. So like I mentioned, like for my own kind of lifestyle interventions, I'm very into lifestyle medicine. I recently got the certification in that from the ADLM just to educate myself. And as I kind of go through that journey, I use my scans to track that data, to see how I'm doing on things like my visceral fat as I'm trying to gain muscle, see how that's going for me. At some point in my life, it'll be how much of my muscle am I losing, right? And I think these are important data points, because you can't just rely on the generic advice and hope that it applies to you. You should really test it.
Something I forgot to ask you about is that for Prenuvo, you said, you mentioned you guys identify essentially as clinics. Do you have any proprietary medical devices like the scan? Like what is the MRI machine yours? Do you buy it from a company? Like what kind of products do you guys actually use, and what's proprietary to you?
Well, we're fully vertically integrated, and that's the difference between us and others in the space. And the reason we do that is we think it's such a complex process that unless you control every part of it in a very specific way, it's very hard to consistently produce the outcomes that you'd want to produce. So we manufacture, we have all our MRI. We don't own an MRI manufacturing facility. We have them manufactured by major device manufacturers, which are all FDA, participating in all that. We have 2 suppliers. We have them build the same exact magnet to spec. It's a type of magnet you wouldn't see outside of let's say a research lab.
You white label a MRI machine essentially.
Yes, and it has a very specific, so you could think of it as like, that's the kitchen, right? So we have a pro grade kitchen. And then our recipes have been developed over 15 years. The recipes are the protocols that you use to run the machine. And those are proprietary. We publish, like we share broad information in medicine, but we don't disclose all the secret sauce that would, let you do the exact Prenuvo scan. So to get the exact Prenuvo scan, you have to come to Prenuvo's place to get it.
What's interesting about medicine is that as you start to go through it, you start to realize how fragmented it is. And like, as an example, I think the AMA really represents probably less than 10% of most physicians. Like, I don't think I've ever met a physician in my life who was like, yeah, the AMA is great. No, sorry, AMA, but I'm just relaying information. The reason why I mention this is that I think the main one is the American College of Radiology. So how have societies essentially responded to Prenuvo and stuff? I'm wondering what does that look like?
I would say the ACR stance, I mean, some people say they're against it. They're not. The stance says that there's not enough evidence to recommend for it, but they don't recommend against it. They say they're watching it closely. And we have lots, I don't get into individual cases, but one of our most common and growing types of people that come to us, patients, customers, members, whatever you want to call them, whatever they call themselves, are people in the healthcare field, and in particular, significant numbers of physicians. And there have been radiologists that have posted publicly about their experiences. So it's like anything else, the societies represent people. I understand the ACR's position, and I wouldn't actually expect anything else, because societies aren't moving ahead of evidence. They're kind of defining what the consensus should be and the governance around that. And obviously things change over time, and societies don't agree with each other over stuff that's been around for 50 or 60 years. So
all right, go on X and look at the discussions. Yeah. I mean, we can't even make a decision about whether eating a certain type of food more or less is good,
or even people are pro mammograms in general, but the ACR, right, their recommendations versus let's say the American College of Family Physicians or the more primary care driven groups, and the USPTF, they're different. It's almost like a twofold difference of how frequently you get the test. And that's not a minor difference when you consider it's been around for 50 years. So you have to sort of realize I think modern medicine, particularly the more data we get, it's going to be, there's a lot of agency in this. People have to develop their own opinion, their own taste for what they like. It's not going to be spoon fed to you. And, no one can guarantee a health outcome. People can guarantee to give you care for certain things, and you have to read the fine print with an insurance plan to figure out what they're actually going to give you because a lot of people are sometimes surprised about what is and isn't covered. And it's a bit of a luxury to be outside of that, to be honest with you, because we can just provide to patients what they value and give them an experience they like. And it's just the only relationship is us with the patient. It's actually really interesting to not have the third party, the payer or insurer involved in that. I think it's actually a much more pure interaction, to be honest.
I agree. And I personally, I feel like there's going to be this new sort of not trend, but movement happening. It's started happening. I'm seeing more of it on X where people are looking at their insurance policy for like a family of 4 and stuff. And a lot of times like this, somebody posted about this was like, they're paying, I don't know, $15K a year for their health insurance for them and I think it's a family of 4 or 5. And then for them to actually meet their deductible, they're going to have to spend like $30K. And so the guy was like, this feels very like irresponsible, but I don't see the point in carrying insurance. And so I feel like, even me, I'm evaluating that, which is like, maybe we just have like some sort of a one-time, like, I don't know, accidental insurance, something that gets us hospitalized, but just paying cash for everything. Because like for me, as an example, and I think this training people and patients to have more agency is great. Because like for me, I needed an MRI actually, funny enough, like a couple years ago, I had a deadlifting. It was a deadlift. And so like my doctor's like, yeah, we should definitely get the scan. And then I know barely use my insurance, and my insurance is like, well, for this to happen, listen how stupid this is. The insurance company was like, well, before you get the MRI scan, we want you to go get an X-ray. And I'm like, what's an X-ray going to show for a back injury?
This is so good. I mean,
and then I gave up. That's the thing. They won. I was just like, screw it. I'll just do. And it's thankfully I rehabilitated my back. But like, I'm like, I don't have the time to go get an X-ray and everything.
So this summer, I had the same issue, and I went to a clinic, and they want to do an X-ray before I saw anybody. And I said, like, I'm a radiologist, and I was actually I was like a musculoskeletal radiologist. I'm really certain that of the things that could be causing my pain, like none of the likely ones are on the X-ray. So I'm going to go ahead and say no, because I'll just, and they were like, they were like incredulous. It was like the first time anyone did it. And then I got in this instance, I was able to sort of like figure it out, and the pain went away, and I didn't, obviously I can get into an imaging situation pretty quickly if I want to. But I didn't need to. But it was funny in that instance, right? Like the healthcare system, I'm not gonna say which one, because I think they were just trying to help. But you see this all the time. Like people are very upfront with imaging, but then if somebody else does it a different way, it's like, oh, they're overdoing it. So imaging gives you information. And MRI is beautiful because it gives you information that's very high quality without any radiation. And I'm just a believer in more information is generally better. I mean, that's like the modern world, right? You can overdo it. You can sort of look at your wearable and ingest that information in a way that keeps you up at night, or you can use your wearable as the motivation to sleep well. It really is up to the individual.
I will say like, if you look at, alcohol consumption has gone down in America by like a lot. Like the alcohol industry is like not in a good position right now. I think a big part of this, aside from generational differences, like the younger generations just don't drink. But the other side of it, I think, is the introduction of wearables, because like whether it's Whoop or Aura or whatever, every time somebody's having a drink, like you have this thing in the back of your head, you're like, oh, do I want to wake up to see the red like recovery and see that? And I think as a result, like it's changed behavior. Like I was a guy, I used to have like a couple beers every weekend. And that went from like a few beers. Like I think I used to have like 4 to 5 drinks a week, right? Not counting social situations. And then now, like, I think I might have 4 to 5 drinks every year, maybe. like, so I
love it. I love it. As a radiologist, as a lifestyle medicine person, I love this phenomenon you're talking about. Like, I love the fact that people are onto it, because for years there was this guidance about drinking in like 1 or 2 drinks a day. Like one drink a day may even like be good for your heart if it's red wine, all this stuff.
The wine,
as I understand it,
I feel
true.
like that was such like clear propaganda. Like even back then, I was just like, this just doesn't make sense. Like it, you know,
just doesn't make sense.
but
And so
people take
alcohol
that
is,
advice and they suit and they're like, oh yeah, like, you know, if it's recommended by professionals, then like I should do this, you know?
right. But that just shows you kind of have to do what you did and think for yourself. But alcohol, in fact, is one of the biggest carcinogens in our society. Like everyone knows cigarette smoking, and unfortunately, cigar smoking. I'm an anti-smoker guy, but I anti-smoking.
Every now and then, I would say I think smoking a cigar is definitely better than like drinking alcohol.
It's hard for me to compare, but I'll just say people think about smoking instantly because they think about cancer risk. They don't think about obesity and alcohol as cancer risk, but that's like number
You're
2
right.
and 3 of the modifiable. These are really demonstrable cancer risks. And I think people are starting to understand that. So people are drinking less. And I know everybody wants to chalk it up to GLPs, and maybe that is the only thing, but it does seem like people are at least more aware that eating whole foods are better, that losing fat reduces your cancer risk, your arthritis risk, your dementia risk, heart disease, diabetes. Like it's kind of a no regrets move. And cutting out alcohol, I mean, people are drinking less at younger ages. I think it's a good thing.
Absolutely. And by the way, I know we're getting close to time, so I appreciate you spending some time with us. I have one last question before you go. I'm wondering, like, in the majority of the patient populations that come to you guys, is there I don't know how to put this. I would imagine that a lot of people who come to you, they're not like that much older, so they're probably like late 30s, early 40s, and everything. But is there sort of like a common thing that comes up that you guys are seeing like across all your scans?
There's a lot of fascinating things. So I'll say our average age.
Tell us the most, just to wrap up, most fascinating findings across all the data and the scans you guys have done that surprised you.
Well, yeah. So things that like before I came to Prenuvo that I wouldn't have thought about. First of all, I wouldn't have realized our average age is actually 51, which is pretty close to the general healthcare population. Like in hospitals, it's typically like, between 55. So we're a little bit earlier, which makes sense. But we're not only folks in their 30s. Things that we see a lot of this, what they call tech neck. It's a specific type of disc bulge in the cervical spine that people think is from, that we're seeing more of looking down at people's phones. And there's speculation. I don't know if there's trials yet that show that yoga and other postural exercises may be able to help with this. So there does seem to be a lot more of that than you would think. There are a variety of conditions where it's published in the literature that you should see this much in a general population. And, we sometimes see more or less than that. I'll give you an example. Fatty liver disease. This is thought to impact 38% of Americans, of whom only 4%, not 4% of the 38% know about it. So almost nobody knows they have this, and it predisposes or is linked. It's not really sure to type 2 diabetes. It also can cause on its own cirrhosis. So it's a big, soon becoming like the biggest cause of liver disease. In our patients, we see less of it, but we still see a lot. So even patients who are so proactive that they would get one of these scans, we see something like 1 in 5 patients, 1 in 6 patients have fatty liver disease. That surprised me. Just the power of these scans of whole body MRI in general, in the current level of technology and resolution and diffusion weighted imaging, not just at Prenuvo, but broadly speaking, it's very powerful for detecting cancer. So let me just kind of put that out there. There are a lot of parts about this that are up for debate, but what isn't up for debate is that whole body MRI catches cancer about as well and probably better than any other single test. And I'll give you an example. So meta-analyses, our data is about 20% of this. So most of the data comes from other investigators. Big meta-analysis, European Journal of Radiology, last fall, 2025, showed that on average in the 9,000 patients in literature, cancer is detected in about 1.6% of patients. And that's, that might seem small, but it's like, hold up for a second. How many people walk around with cancer? Shouldn't be that high, right? I mean, it could be that high, but it shouldn't be like 5-6%. You'd think it would be somewhere between, let's say, 1 and 3%, just if you kind of run numbers. So you go a little deeper and you say, well, how many is that in 1,000? That's about 16 patients in 1,000. How many patients does mammography find? And again, different cancers, we sometimes overlap. Sometimes we find something Mammo miss. Mammo definitely finds stuff that we miss. So you can't, I'm not saying it covers breast better than Mammo, but Mammo finds about 4 cancers in 1,000. All right. Colonoscopy finds about 11 cancers out of 1,000, and Pap smears find about 1 cancer in 1,000. So if you total up all the things that are recommended in general population, you get like the same number, 16 per 1,000. So that's how powerful whole body MRI in general, like reported by third parties. Our data that in our largest study is a little bit higher. It was like closer to 2.2%. But that might have been an older subpopulation. It was in one of our a clinic in Canada where the patients skew a little bit older and sicker than our general population. So I do think that this is what we're going to see. It's going to land somewhere between 1% and 2%. My understanding about things like MSEDs, that they're quite a bit lower than that. And again, I think MSEDs have a place. I think they'd probably outperform us for blood cancer and lymphoma. But I think for solid cancers, based on the data I've seen, I think we detect a little bit earlier.
That's fascinating. I'm really happy that we were able to come on the show. And again, thank you for spending some time with us. For those who are listening, just be sure to go to prenuvo.com/state of MedTech. And then Dr. Durand, give a shout out, your handle on X so people can follow you.
Oh, absolutely. I don't even know my X handle. I might have to edit that part, man.
No, I guess if anybody goes on X, just look up Daniel Durand. You'll be able to find him and give him a follow. So, but thanks again for coming on the show, Doctor.
Absolutely, Omar. Pleasure to be here.
Thanks, everybody. If you enjoyed this, be sure to forward this on to somebody, especially if it's a physician or somebody who's interested in scans. And again, be sure to go to prenuvo.com/state of MedTech. We'll see you all next time.
Thanks for checking out this episode. If you want to do me a big favor and join so many other people who have helped grow this podcast, take a second and look below. If you're on Apple, give us 5 stars and write a short review. If you're on Spotify, just give us 5 stars. And if you're on YouTube, hit the like button. And most importantly, if you can, subscribe. We release so many different episodes that you may miss. Be sure to subscribe and turn your notifications on. You get extra points with me if you subscribe across all 3 channels. Thank you so much. And if you felt like this episode helped you, send this to somebody who would really enjoy and appreciate it. Share and spread the love. We'll see you all next time.